The year is 1663. In the kingdom of Mbande, in what is now Angola, an 80-year-old woman takes her final breath. She dies in her own bed, in her own palace, in her own kingdom, unconquered. For 40 years, the Portuguese Empire, one of the most powerful forces on earth, tried to break her. They failed. Her name was Nzinga Mbande, and this is the story they erased from your history books. To understand Queen Nzinga, you must first understand the world she was born into. The year is 1583, Central Africa. The kingdom of Ndongo sits in what Europeans will later call Angola. It's a sophisticated state with organized government, complex trade networks, and military traditions stretching back centuries. The Mbundu people who inhabit this region are not isolated. They trade with neighboring kingdoms, they have diplomatic relationships, they have laws, courts, and hierarchies of power. Nzinga is born into royalty. Her father is Ngola Kiluanji, the king. The title Ngola means king. It's where the Portuguese will later get the name Angola. But by the time of her birth, something sinister has already begun. 40 years earlier, in 1575, Portuguese colonizers established a settlement at Luanda. They didn't come for exploration, they came for business, the slave trade business. The Portuguese had discovered something profitable. European colonies in Brazil needed labor. Massive plantations growing sugar demanded workers, millions of them, and Africa had people. The Portuguese strategy was simple. Establish coastal trading posts, make deals with some African kingdoms to raid others, create a supply chain of human beings, ship them across the Atlantic. But the kingdom of Ndongo refused to cooperate. King Kiluanji saw exactly what was happening. Portuguese presence meant destabilization. It meant warfare. It meant his people being chained and shipped to a world they'd never return from. So he resisted. This decision would define Nzinga's entire life. Nzinga grows up in a kingdom at war. From childhood, she watches her father fight the Portuguese. She sees the raids, the kidnappings, the betrayals by neighboring kingdoms who sold their own people for European guns and cloth. But Nzinga isn't being raised like other royal daughters. Her father recognizes something in her: intelligence, strategic thinking, and iron will. He does something radical for the time. He allows her to participate in military discussions, to learn warfare, to understand politics and diplomacy. By the time she's a young woman, Nzinga can ride a horse as well as any man. She understands military tactics. She knows how to read people, how to negotiate, how to identify weakness. She has to. Because in 1617, her father dies. Her brother, Ngola Mbande, takes the throne, and almost immediately, everything falls apart.
Mbande is paranoid, cruel, weak. He fears Nzinga's popularity and competence, so he does something unforgivable. He orders the murder of Nzinga's son. He wants to eliminate any rival claim to the throne. Nzinga survives, but the kingdom doesn't. Under Mbande's incompetent rule, the Portuguese advance. They win battles, they take territory. By 1621, Ndongo is losing the war. The Portuguese governor sends a message: come to Luanda to negotiate peace. Mbande is terrified. He doesn't want to go. He doesn't trust himself in a room with Portuguese officials. So he sends the one person he knows can handle it: his sister. The year is 1622. Nzinga enters the Portuguese fortress in Luanda. She's 39 years old. She arrives with a small entourage dressed in royal regalia. Her bearing is regal, confident. She walks like someone who knows exactly who she is. The Portuguese governor and his officials are waiting. And then comes the insult. In the negotiation room, Portuguese officials sit on ornate chairs, high-backed, comfortable, symbols of power and status. For Nzinga, they've placed a floor mat, the kind servants sit on. The message is clear: you are beneath us. You are not an equal. You will sit on the ground while we look down at you. It's a calculated humiliation, a power play designed to establish dominance before a single word is spoken. Every eye in the room watches Nzinga's reaction. She doesn't flinch. She surveys the room calmly. Then she does something that will echo through history. She gestures to one of her servants. The woman immediately comes forward and gets down on her hands and knees. Nzinga sits on her back, creating a human throne, elevating herself to eye level with the Portuguese officials. And then she begins negotiating. The room is stunned. The Portuguese didn't expect this. They expected submission, embarrassment maybe, but not this. Not someone who would refuse the insult so completely and creatively that she turns it into a demonstration of her own power. The negotiation proceeds. Nzinga speaks Portuguese fluently. She understands their legal concepts. She matches them point for point. The Portuguese realize quickly that they're not dealing with someone they can intimidate. They reach an agreement. The Portuguese will withdraw from certain territories. Ndongo will allow limited Portuguese presence. There will be peace. Nzinga even agrees to be baptized as a Christian, taking the name Ana de Souza. It's a strategic move. If she's Christian, she can negotiate as a civilized equal in Portuguese eyes. She returns to Ndongo victorious. She saved the kingdom from total collapse. She humiliated the Portuguese in their own fortress. But she knows something they don't yet realize. The Portuguese have no intention of honoring this treaty. In 1624, Nzinga's brother Mbande dies. The circumstances are suspicious. Some historians believe he was poisoned. Some believe he committed suicide under pressure. Some believe Nzinga had him killed. Whatever the truth, she immediately seizes power. But there's a problem. In Ndongo, women don't traditionally rule. The position of Angola is male. Nzinga doesn't care about tradition. She declares herself king, not queen, king. She will dress as a man in certain contexts. She will lead armies personally. She will refuse every limitation placed on women. If being female is an obstacle to power, she'll simply stop performing as female in the political sphere. It's revolutionary, unthinkable for the time, but Nzinga understands something fundamental. Power isn't given, it's taken and then defended. She needs to defend it immediately, because the Portuguese have already broken the treaty. The Portuguese never intended peace. They wanted time to regroup, to reinforce, to prepare for total conquest. By 1626, they launch a full-scale invasion. Nzinga realizes she's facing an existential threat. The Portuguese have guns, cannons, superior military technology. They've allied with rival African kingdoms who were willing to raid Ndongo in exchange for weapons and goods. She cannot win a traditional war, so she doesn't fight one. Nzinga creates guerrilla warfare tactics that will frustrate the Portuguese for decades. She refuses pitched battles. Instead, her forces hit supply lines, ambush patrols, strike at night, and disappear into the terrain. She uses the landscape to her advantage, forests, rivers, mountains that Portuguese soldiers in heavy armor can't navigate. She trains her warriors in mobility, speed, adaptability. While Portuguese forces march in formation, her soldiers move like ghosts. But she needs more than tactics. She needs manpower. So she does something brilliant. She declares her kingdom a sanctuary for escaped slaves. Any enslaved person who reaches her territory becomes free, automatically, no questions asked. Think about what this means. The Portuguese economy in Angola depends on the slave trade. They're capturing people and shipping them to Brazil. But now those people have an escape route, a destination, a queen who will protect them. Enslaved people begin fleeing to Nzinga's kingdom. Some travel for weeks, they risk death, but they come. And when they arrive, Nzinga doesn't just free them, she arms them, trains them, turns them into soldiers who have every reason to fight.
The Portuguese are creating their own enemy. Every person they enslave becomes a potential warrior for Nzinga. She's not just fighting a war, she's sabotaging the entire economic model of Portuguese colonialism. The Portuguese are furious. They increase military pressure. They try to starve her kingdom. They ally with neighboring states to surround her. In 1629, they succeed. Sort of. They push her forces out of Ndongo. They install a puppet ruler. They think they've won. But Nzinga doesn't surrender. She relocates to the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. She conquers it, makes it her new base, and the war continues. By the 1640s, Nzinga has been fighting for over 15 years. She's in her 60s. Most leaders would seek peace. She seeks advantage. In 1641, the Dutch arrive in Luanda. They're at war with Portugal globally, competing for colonial dominance. Nzinga sees opportunity. She sends envoys to the Dutch. She proposes an alliance. Together, they can crush the Portuguese in Angola. The Dutch agree. They provide weapons, military support, naval power. For 7 years, this alliance holds. Portuguese forces are pushed back. They lose territory. They're genuinely threatened. Nzinga fights alongside her soldiers. She's now in her 60s, personally commanding forces, leading raids. She dresses in male military attire. She refuses to stay in the palace while her people fight. The Portuguese are getting destroyed by a grandmother. But in 1648, Portugal sends massive reinforcements from Brazil. The tide turns. The Dutch are pushed out of Luanda. The alliance collapses. Most leaders would surrender at this point. The Portuguese have won. The Dutch are gone. It's over. Nzinga negotiates, but not surrender. Another treaty. She'll stop active warfare if the Portuguese recognize her sovereignty over Matamba, if they leave her kingdom alone. The Portuguese, exhausted from decades of warfare, agree. Nzinga rules Matamba for the rest of her life. She transforms it into a regional power. She maintains her policy of escaped slaves. She continues to be a thorn in Portugal's side, just less openly. She builds diplomatic relationships across the region. She's respected, feared, admired. She never marries. She maintains power alone. She surrounds herself with female warriors and advisors, creating a court that reflects her own rejection of gender limitations. In 1663, at the age of 80, she dies peacefully in her palace. She ruled for 37 years. She fought the Portuguese for 40 years, from that first negotiation in 1622 to her death. She was never conquered, never captured, never broken. The Portuguese tried everything: military force, economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, political assassination attempts. Nothing worked. So why don't you know her name? Because Queen Nzinga represents something that colonialism needed to erase: African resistance, African competence, African sovereignty. The narrative of colonialism requires that Africans were passive victims, primitive people who were easily conquered because they were inferior. Nzinga destroys that narrative. She was brilliant, strategic, unbreakable. She fought the Portuguese Empire to a standstill for 40 years. She proved that European colonization wasn't inevitable. It wasn't civilized nations helping primitive ones. It was violent conquest resisted every step of the way. That's why her story was buried, because it's dangerous. It reveals the truth. Africa didn't fall because Africans were weak. It fell because Europeans had superior weapons and zero moral restraint. And even then, people like Nzinga made them pay for every inch. Her legacy lives on, not in textbooks, but in the spirit of resistance, in the understanding that power demands to be challenged, that occupation deserves rebellion. Queen Nzinga Mbande. Remember her name.